there's like people in the government that are regular people too, and they have their own set of incentives. And just like Charlie Munger said, show me the incentives, they'll show you the outcome. And so the best usually incentive is like, what can I do that's good for myself? And that doesn't mean that you then are taking from other people, because having respect and being kind to other people is good for you too. It's like good for your soul, but then it's also good for the relationships. And most of us get ahead in life and accomplish things because we do something with not solo, at least one other person. So focusing on the positives and what's capable, and like just going back to like what I said before in terms of what makes America special, like that's how I was able to get out of government and into some pretty cool companies, was because people helped me out.
My brother Ben, we met, Jesus, it must have been what, 24 years ago or something in Chicago?
Yeah,
23,
2002.
yeah, so 23 years.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So I think I was already at the Chicago, what is it, Equity Exchange before I went to Board of Trade. And you came from New York, is that right?
Yeah, I transferred from our New York office. First, I did like we were dating at the time and we'd broken up. And my wife told me that the only way we were going to get back together is if we lived together. So I asked our CEO at the time if I could transfer to Chicago, and he said yes. And so that's how and then we got to be this crew of clerks.
Yeah, so we were basically getting abused by the traders, and we're all hoping that we can just make it to trade, and then we're going to make all this money. And so I was like, I at the time, looking back to my young brain, I was like, I will get, I mean, as long as it wasn't like, sexually abused, I will get, mentally and physically and spiritually abused every day. I don't care. I just got to make the money because I had the dreams that I want to be wealthy. I was like super focused on being wealthy to give me my freedom. And I remember you very quickly, we became very close. I was like, this guy's awesome. We hung out, outside. I remember going to the beach with you and just hanging out with you and Katie, having a great time. You were just like, fuck this. This sucks. And so you started studying for this. I think was it what was the exam you were studying
The
for?
Foreign Service exam
Yeah.
to join the State Department.
Yeah. So you very early on were like, I'm not going to be in this toxic environment. I'm out. So do you remember though, what got you into trading? Because I feel like most people that are attracted to trading, they wanted to make a lot of money. And we were kind of late. Like I feel like if we were there a few years earlier, it
Mhm.
was free money. And then every year the money got harder and harder to make. But were you just like, there's nothing worth this kind of environment? Or what made you be like, I'm going to completely change from being a pit trader traveling around the world?
So, first I got into finance because I was teaching English in Japan, and I had this crazy idea of what my life was going to be like if I were to continue with that. And I sort of like quickly came to realization that's not the path that I wanted to go down. And I looked at my successful friends from college, and they were either management consultants or investment bankers. And so I was like, I should try to become one of those, as if it's that easy. And I made it to the final round with an investment bank for an analyst program in Tokyo. And a mentor of mine, after that didn't work out, said, if you really want to do this, you should move to New York. So I took whatever job I could to move to New York from Japan. And that ended up being in advertising, working on a Japanese account. And while I was there, I was just hustling all the time to try to meet people that were in investment banking. And eventually, through a rugby team that I was on, I met Simon, and he was like, I heard you want to get into finance. And I was like, yeah. And then he's like, you should come check out my company. And I didn't know the difference between investment banking. I didn't know anything about finance. I didn't know the difference between trading or investment banking. And so I ended up getting an offer from Mako and then another company. And if Mako seemed like the better opportunity. And then after I was clerking on the NYMEX, I had like they told me to make a market on my hair. And then I got like, I don't remember, like not that much money to dye it blue. And if you ever are in this situation, make sure that you factor in how much it costs to dye your hair, because you should like add that on top to whatever they're going to pay you to dye your hair. Because it was basically like half the money I got went to just getting the hair dye. So I was there trading on the or clerking on the NYMEX. First, I thought it was awesome. And then after 2 weeks, I realized it wasn't awesome. And I wrote down on a piece of paper, what do I want out of life? And that was travel, live overseas, learn more about other cultures and languages, and serve something more than the bottom line. And that's what led to me going in, like pursuing the opportunity to go into government, even though I think I still was at Mako for like a year and a half.
Yeah, while you got everything ready, you studied for the test.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
I had so much respect for you because you were. I love people that are just like, nope, I'm not going to do this. There's no amount of money that will, that will put you. You were just like, this is not what I want to do, and I don't care. They can dangle the carrot of all this money. I don't care. It's not what I want to do. And then you basically left, and then you basically fell off the map. I know you traveled the world. You had a family. And then we spoke. I think we had a long call 2020, and I've
Yeah.
been looking forward to this conversation for the last 5 years. So what was it like? So did you get married before you left? Before you left US?
Yeah. So Katie and I got married in 2005, June. So we actually just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. And then the following year, we went overseas for our first tour, which was Lagos, Nigeria. And then after that, we went to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, then Djibouti, then Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, then Jakarta, Indonesia. Katie and the girls, we had two daughters along the way, stayed back in Indonesia while I did a tour in Iraq. Then we came back. That was 2018, expecting to go overseas again. I would have gone to Central Asia. I was learning Russian for that and doing some other things, and concluded that it was time to leave the government. I know I just fast forwarded through a whole bunch of stuff.
No, that's incredible. Can you talk about what you were doing, or is it classified?
No, it's not classified. So I worked both for the State Department, and then the CIA. So advancing U.S. foreign policy and other initiatives.
So for me, there's two sides of the coin. So I'm a proud American citizen now. It took me 22 years, I think, to get it. It was a long process, three work visas, two green cards. I finally get my citizenship. And there's something about the spirit of American capitalism and opportunity that I really look up to, and I feel honored to have a US passport. I have no patriotism towards my former, English heritage. Like I'm not one of those guys who a lot of people keep their former, wherever they came from when they moved to the US, they proudly represent that flag. For me, I'm all about American values. But at the same time, I recognize that a lot of what I've learned about kind of meddling in all these other countries has not been great. After all that experience, do you have some opinions on that?
I think that's something that Americans don't understand what freedom means is economic freedom. That we have the opportunity. I mean, just probably what brought you here and kept you here was the fact that you can move up and down that socioeconomic ladder in a way that is completely whether it's Belgium or the Congo, that's just not available in other countries. And I've seen that even more as I've gone into the tech world, just in the way that you're able to get access to capital and build a business. And there's so fewer restraints or constraints in the United States than in other countries. And so aside from what our foreign policy is or isn't, what draws people to the United States, and I think what allows people to put us on a pedestal in a way that's justified is that opportunity that you could move here. And it's not the same as like you're on a boat and then you go by Ellis Island, but just like that same sort of concept. You can move here with nothing. You just left Italy or you just left war-torn East Timor, and you could really make something out of your life more so than somebody that's born here.
Mm. Yeah, there's all those crazy statistics where it's got like that average income of American born versus Pakistani born, like the different Indian born, the different families, the different
Yes.
cultures that are here, and American born from American families are way down the list. Like all these other cultures that have come here thriving, and it seems like we're not. And I think part of that is because there's a lot of entitled kind of attitudes with people that are born here, especially if with well-to-do parents and these other immigrant families. Even if the person is born here, if the parents came as immigrants, they just have a whole different mindset. Like that immigrant mentality is real. I see that again and again. It's just and you see it, it's so cool that, you found jujitsu now and you're in love with jujitsu, and I've been doing it a long time. And I look at a lot of the people that came here through jiu-jitsu from Brazil with almost nothing, and they take the same mindset that made them a jiu-jitsu champion. They're now applying it to just life. And I see all these people that I competed against years ago, these Brazilians
Mhm.
now getting their citizenship and opening up schools and just being really entrepreneurial because they have the availability here. You're right, man. Like so many people talk about, oh, like, they think they're somehow disadvantaged, but they were born with a US passport. And it's like, do you
Yes.
realize, like, if you travel around the world, do you realize how many people dream about having that passport? I'll never forget when I was in Cuba many years ago, I was doing some boxing training out there and just talking to the people. They were like, they just saw the opportunity in America as like, if I could just get there, my
Hmm.
life is open to me. But in Cuba, like they had absolutely nothing, and it's sometimes that's the biggest thing about traveling for me is you just get a different perspective that you forget. Like even I've been very blessed to travel widely. You've had an incredible, incredible life traveling the world. But so many people that even with that, I still forget. Sometimes I have to be reminded when I go to these other countries of all the blessings that we do have here.
What I really loved was living overseas because it felt like every day was an adventure, whether it was going to the grocery store, going to the beach, or really having an adventure. And not that like, and then I think it's also then you can start to think, oh, things are boring in the United States. And probably the more time I spent overseas, the more appreciation that I had for things that are unique in America. I'm from a small town in northern Michigan, and I kind of grew up thinking that if I was stuck there, my life would be less and I needed to get an education. I needed to live in big cities. I needed to live abroad and see things that were exotic to really fulfill my potential. And I probably come have a much different perspective on that now that somebody that's from my hometown, Traverse City, could have just as expansive idea of the universe and life as I could, or somebody that has traveled more and done more things than I have, simply by being dedicated to reading and talking to people. It's like just where do you if you put yourself into situations where you can learn, especially like in a slightly uncomfortable situation where you could like whatever failure would look like in that, that's how you open yourself up. I mean, you think like we could probably bring everything back to jujitsu all the time. Like if you don't test your current abilities, then you're never going to get better. And to test your current abilities means to reveal where you're weak. And to reveal where you're weak is how you will get strong.
Mm. That's so interesting. So you're from Traverse City in Michigan. I'm from a suburb of London. We probably had a fairly similar upbringing, but I had the exact same desire to travel the world. And it's so funny. I actually applied to a program to teach English in Japan, and I was on the wait list. And then I got the opportunity to join the trading company that sent me to first to Europe and then to New York and then to Chicago. So we kind of followed a similar trajectory. And then I've spent a lifetime. I remember when I got my first bonus as a clerk, it was $1,500. And I took a 2 week vacation to Philippines, 22 years ago. That was like, every time I got any bit of money, I would just spend it on
Mm.
travel. I just wanted to experience travel, experience life. But I still think, if you now after all the travel, I appreciate where I live, where I'm raising my family now is in an hour south of Chicago, just across the border into Indiana, in a small town. It's probably I'm trying to get the same upbringing for my son that
Mm.
we had, probably like that small town values and not much crime and things like that. But I still think there's so much wisdom you get from traveling. Like there's that expression that the Confucian sayings, and something like, traveling at 1,000 miles is like reading X amount of books. I'm butchering the saying, but it's something about that. Like you learn so much wisdom from traveling and talking to people. So what were you like as a young man? You arrive in Lagos. I've never been to Nigeria. What was that like the culture shock?
It's like Mad Max. It is wild. It's pejorative. So, like any Nigerians that are listening, I love your country. I love the people, and I'm a better person for having lived there. But it was a serious learning curve, and it's almost like if you can make it. Like people say, you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. No, if you can make it in Lagos, you can make it anywhere, and that's like in any sort of like walk of life. It's just a very there's a lot of disparity between the haves and have not. There's a lot of crime. There's things you'll see on the street there that you'll never see anywhere else, like people walking around with hyenas on a leash, or just some random starving horse in the middle of the street. And then like 3 hours later, you see that same horse dead upside down. Like the only time I've ever seen a dead body is there. And then like incredible music. The day we left there was terrible traffic jams. They called them go slows. And the day that we left, we just missed one because there was it usually takes you like budget 6 hours to get to the airport. And not because you needed to get there so many hours before to check in. Like you're a diplomat, so you're going to be able to check in, no problem. But it was just because like the traffic could just like become terrible. And you have to go over these bridges. And right before we got to the bridge that would have been called the third mainland bridge, there was a Coca-Cola bottle truck. And the way that you would get Coke there and like any other soda, there would be, you would just have reused bottles.
Right.
Not like they just like reuse them right then, like to be washed and stuff like that, but they would like take them to a bottling factory and then redistribute the Coke. So this truck somehow had like tipped over and it was just like powdered, shattered glass like all over this highway. And there was one guy trying to clean it up with a flip flop, like his flip flop, and he had his other flip flop on the other foot, and it was just like just brush it. You could just like imagine, extrapolate like this like wait that we had, which was only a few minutes, is going to quickly become hours.
That's so crazy. Well, so as a like now as a father, I'm sure it's different, but as a young man, were you worried about your safety?
The only times, again, like it seems like there's a lot of like singular events that happened in Nigeria. The only times that I've ever felt like I was in danger were Nigeria, but it was really exciting. It was exactly what I was looking for. So yes, but I was grateful, not grateful, but it was like that's what I sought out. No, but no, it wasn't like anything like there was ever real any like life or death, but it was definitely an intense experience, a unique, intense experience.
Yeah, my dad used to fly to Lagos. He's a retired
Mhm.
pilot. And he said, he flew all over the world. And I just remember him saying at Lagos that most countries they were pretty there wasn't much restrictions. And my dad, he used to love to go out and he would like run and cycle and he'd just be out
Mhm.
with the people all over the world. He never had much carefree safety. But he said at the time, I don't, I'm sure it over the decades there's more peaceful years and less peaceful years. But he just said with Lagos, he would go straight from the airport with armed security, take him to the hotel. They weren't allowed to leave the hotel until they got armed security to go back to the airport and leave. It was like that was one of the hard, the most they were worried about personal safety. So that's why I asked. But for you, I guess it's different. You play rugby when you were young. You're like a manly man. But what about for Katie? Your wife, she's this
Oh man, I
young woman.
probably, yeah.
You're like
Yeah.
you're like, honey, I got this posting in Nigeria. We're going to Nigeria. What was she thinking?
So like I didn't even know where I thought I was going to go to Japan because I had lived in Japan and I spoke Jap like I lived in Japan for 2 years in university and then taught English for that first year out of school. So Africa was not on my mental map of where I would have gone for my first tour. And when they told me I was going to Lagos, I said, "Where is that?" And people in the room laughed. They thought I was making a joke. And then when they said it was in Nigeria, I was like, "Where's that?" So neither one of us really knew anything about it. And we had two cars. I had the bigger one. She had the smaller, like Nissan Sunny, which I don't know what the equivalent of that is, but it's like a hatchback. And I had a Mitsubishi Pajero, which is the car. We should have flipped it around. Like she should have been in the Pajero. I should have been in the Sunny. But she had a great driver, Mateus, who was from Benin, and he took wonderful care of her. And thankfully, nothing ever happened. But there was plenty of like horror stories that we heard about other diplomats with home invasions and like even gunfire when like kids were home with the nanny and the nanny's like on top of the baby because like not that there's bullets coming through the house, but they can definitely hear like bullets nearby being shot. So it's not like being cavalier, just like fortunately, like everything worked out. Not that hope is not a plan, but things did work out and we were okay.
But did she ever question it, or was she just like, "This is a great event.
No,
Go"?
No, I was very, I was, and I'm very fortunate to be married to an amazing woman who supported the things that I wanted to do and also pushed me to be a better person.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think about that with the US with it seems like with an inflationary monetary policy, the people, the haves that have assets, they have houses, they have big stock
Mhm.
portfolios, they have all these, investment properties and crypto and everything. It seems like since 2020, they've done so well because all those assets have appreciated. And then the people that have nothing that are struggling even more, and the prices keep going up. So the haves and have-nots, like the gap seems to be widening. And I feel like that's the problem with a lot of these, the most dangerous countries, like, in Africa and other places, is when you have that massive disparity between the haves and have-nots. And I don't really fault the have-nots for it. But I mean, the value of a human life for someone that's struggling to feed their kids, if they can kill
Hmm.
someone to make a bit of money, like, if you put yourself in their situation, you might do the same thing. Like it's very different from a society where people have the basic things and there's just less struggle. So I worry about that with the US. It does seem like the gulf between the people that have assets and that don't is just going to keep widening, and it's going to cause an escalation of violence and things like that.
It definitely seems like people talk about it a lot. Whether that gulf is truly is that dire, or is it just something that gets played up? And it's almost like it gets played up, but there's no solution except for a redistribution of wealth, which obviously doesn't work because every time they try it, that ends up like destroying a country. I know that if I wouldn't have like figured some things out for myself, including that I would have a better opportunity for my wife and daughters if I left government, that nobody else was going to help me out. And it doesn't mean like something like, oh, I'm enlightened and like nobody else could figure this out. But you really, no one's coming to save you.
Hmm.
And why would you expect them to? Like, I mean, I worked for the government, and so it's not like something where it's like, oh, I know everything else that happens in the government. But like the government, there's like people in the government that are regular people too, and they have their own set of incentives. And just like Charlie Munger said, show me the incentives, they'll show you the outcome. And so the best usually incentive is like, what can I do that's good for myself? And that doesn't mean that you then are taking from other people, because having respect and being kind to other people is good for you too. It's like good for your soul, but then it's also good for the relationships. And most of us get ahead in life and accomplish things because we do something with more than with not just not solo, like one, at least one other person. So focusing on the positives and what's capable, and like just going back to like what I said before in terms of what makes America special, like that's how I was able to get out of government and into some pretty cool companies, was because people helped me out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something very interesting, Ben. You said people seem to be talking about it more, but is it different? And actually, just I pulled up something on my phone that I saw yesterday. It was from 1940, I think, and it's
Mhm.
an old photo of a lady holding up a sign, and it says, "Our boss owns 77 houses. We can't pay rent." So, I mean, that was nearly a century ago. People were talking about the exact same thing. So, you're
Yes.
how much is it's very easy to get distorted just because we have things front and center in our face now. You can have atrocities around the world and you're going to get photos like right on your phone first thing in the morning. But things that they've always been atrocities, we just weren't aware of them because we didn't have access to them like we do today. So it does become easy to see things as distorted. But yeah, that's a real great point. Did Katie get pregnant for the first time for your first daughter in Nigeria?
Yep. So, Katie, she had the girls when we were in Nigeria and Tanzania, and then she would fly home, month 7 to Madison, Wisconsin to give birth. And both girls were born in the same hospital, that she was.
So was that because if not, they wouldn't have their American citizenship, or was it just for the healthcare, or both?
I don't remember what the I think it's the Latin expression that like the United States is unique in that if even if you're like you're a citizen no matter like where you're born, and then of course like you can also be a citizen if you're born in our country. It had more to do with, I mean, it's not like of course Nigerians and Tanzanians know how to they know how to deliver babies.
Yeah.
It would have just been the if there was a complication, and specifically a complication to do with infection,
Mm.
and it just sort of be more like sanitary is not the best word because then it makes it sound like everything's dirty over there. It's just like just the risk for infection would be lower if you gave birth in the US, and pretty much everybody would do that. I think there would be like a couple anomalies. Somebody like gave birth in Lagos. There was like one. one really nice hospital. I remember when we were there. So it would have been possible, but it was just sort of like, I guess you could say as a kind of a luxury.
Yeah.
Katie could go home, basically be home for 45 days before and 45 days after. And that's all on per diem. So the government is paying for certain parts of that, just as a total like the State Department package. And it's pretty cool that she would be with her mom. Like she could have gone anywhere, but she stayed
Yeah.
with her mom and dad, and so they get to be with her as she's going into delivery, and then they get to be with her, after a month and a half afterwards, and have all that awesome experience with their grandchild.
What about you? Did you come nearer the delivery date?
Correct. So I think I got home a week and a half before Rhea was born, and then unfortunately, I got home 12 hours after Manya was born, which that's a regret. That's a great regret in my life.
Well, brother, we're trying for kid number two, and
All right.
I wasn't around for kid number one. Listen to how fucked up this was, Ben. So we go. He came a month early, and for whatever,
Mhm.
my wife's very much like, I've got a feeling he's going to come late. So when she was getting the symptoms, her water broke, but it was like so minor, she didn't even realize her water broke. So she's like, I think I better go in. But she was kind of stalling, and we're watching all these videos where they say, don't go to hospital early. You're going to be sitting there for 2 days. Like, wait. So we're like watching reruns of The Office, and we're just kind of sitting there. This is during COVID, the first shutdowns, 2020. So then she's like, well, I better go in and just check. So we go to the hospital and they're like, hey, your water broke. You should have come here. Like, what were you doing? And she's like, oh, we didn't really know. So then they're like, okay, we're going to do the standard test. We're going to give you a COVID test. They do the COVID at the
Yeah.
nose. And then they're like, hey, you have COVID. You have to get isolated and your husband's got to go. And it was all happened so quickly. They literally, I was hugging her. She was crying. She was like, I'm scared. Don't go. And these guys just literally pushed me out of the room and shut the door. It was crazy. So then I just had to go home, get her a few things. And then I don't think I was even allowed to see her again. She's there isolated. So she couldn't even be with the other people, delivering. They isolated her. But the thing is, it was such early days and there was so much confusion. The hospital didn't even know the rules. So she's a nice person. So she was like chatting to people. After a while, they're like, we don't even want you isolated. We're going to bring you with everyone else. But I wasn't allowed to be there for the birth. I wasn't allowed to see her for I think I had to wait 48 hours, then get a negative test, then I could take her home. So I'm a little upset with that. I missed.
So you didn't see your son for 48 hours until after he
Yeah.
was born?
Yeah.
Oh
So I
gosh.
remember the next day after he was born, I was at the gym, the jiu-jitsu gym, because that was part of my schedule. And my buddies were like, bro, what are you doing? Like your wife just gave birth. I was like, yeah, I can't even see her for another, 16 hours. I'm losing my mind just sitting at home by myself. So that was pretty messed up.
Yeah, that would have been terrible. I remember when Katie was giving birth to Rhea, there was a point where they thought she was going to have an emergency C-section, and that was stressful enough. And I was there, and they were going to take her to a different room. And fortunately, like all of that passed, and it was all good. But it was like to not to want to be there and not be able to be there, and told you're not allowed to be there. That would have that must have been really hard.
It was, I felt so bad because my last sight of her was her being like, don't leave, just crying.
Yeah,
And as a man, you want to be there for your wife. And I felt
yeah.
so helpless and so frustrated with the bureaucracy of it all, like literally just getting shoved that literally stiff arm out of the door, out of the room. It was bizarre. But brother, happier times. Tanzania has a special place in my heart. I went there with a couple of buddies who Did you meet? Obviously, Danny, Gareth.
Yep.
Did you meet Tom Beta?
Yes.
Tommy, yeah, yeah. Okay, I wasn't sure. The timelines. Poor Tommy has fallen off the map. No one knows what happened to him. The three of us climbed Kilimanjaro. It was Dan's idea. He was like, guys, you want to climb Kilimanjaro? So we did that in 2007. And it was such a beautiful experience. I fell in love with the Tanzanian people. And the way I describe them is I feel like Tanzania is the Thailand of Africa. They have the same sing-song kind of the
Yeah.
voices, and they're just so friendly and wonderful. And I
Mhm.
love Thai people and Thai culture. I had such a good experience. And my guide there, he said, Kilimanjaro it's an experience. But if you want a real experience, climb Mount Meru, which is when you get close to the top, you can see one other mountain about 40 miles away poking out through through the clouds. And they said, on that one, there's a lot less people. It's a lot less tourists.
Mhm.
It's a lot more authentic. And the first day you could see wild elephants and it's just this real special thing. So I actually came back about 10 years later with my dad, and
Sweet.
my dad and I climbed Mount Meru together. So I've had a couple of incredible trips to Tanzania, and it's just such a wonderful place. What was it like living there?
It was complete. I mean, it was so much slower after Nigeria, and we lived really close to the water. For whatever reason, like of course, like Africa gets a bad rep, and Africa is not a country. It's very big, so it's even
Yeah.
funny to say like Africa as if, but I'm talking about two countries right now.
Yeah.
So Nigeria and Tanzania, we'd go swimming in, there was the embassy, the consulate had a beach house that you could go to, and it was quite far away from downtown Lagos, and there would still be like all kinds of garbage. It was almost like that scene in Star Wars where they're stuck in the trash compactor and there's just like all this stuff in there. That's what it was like swimming there sometimes. You would just feel like these bags and things like that. And you're like, Lagos is far. So
Yeah.
it's like imagine what it was like even closer. Whereas Tanzania or Dar had this awesome yacht club that most people from the embassy joined, and you could swim there. And it was, I mean, a stone's throw from downtown Dar, very clean, like water, like pristine, beautiful. We'd watch the sunset on the Indian Ocean, which or the sunrise. No, sunset. No, the sunrise because, but you could still see the sunset even though we were on the eastern side. And it is just these huge clouds, beautiful blues. Like you said, the people are really nice. There was a little bit of crime in Dar, but nothing like Lagos. We went to Zanzibar a lot, which was really cool. We could drive to some like sort of mid-level safari parks from Dar. There was some tea plantations that we could go to for the weekend. So we spent 6 years in Africa, and every tour, which each tour was 2 years, we would take a vacation to South Africa. We had really good family friends in a town called Stellenbosch. And so we'd go to the Western Cape, and that was incredible. I know that doesn't have anything to do with dollars much, but yes, I think that's an appropriate just like relation to say that Thailand and Tanzania are similar to their respective continents.
Well, yeah, I love South Africa too. So I remember for my 30th birthday, so 16 years ago, I was talking to a guy at a resort. I went to the Bahamas with an ex-girlfriend, and I met a guy there from Germany, and he traveled the world in the resort business. And I love talking to people like that, like just about some of
Mhm.
the places that really impacted him. And he was telling me all about South Africa, and he said, if there's one country in the world that you have to, I hadn't been at the time, if there's one country in the world you have to go to, it's South Africa. It's such a special place. And Cape Town's probably the world's most beautiful city. Then I remember I was single. 5 years later, I was about to turn 35, and I had this dream one day of doing the Two Oceans ultramarathon, which is 35
Mhm.
miles. And randomly, one night, I don't know, I was on the internet and I saw that year was on my 35th birthday, the exact day. And I was like, okay, I gotta fly to South Africa and do this race. So I ended up going there for 2 weeks by myself, had the most amazing experience. And I've been back with my wife now twice. And so, yeah, Cape Town and South Africa are really, really special places too. That was incredible. It's so cool. Like you said, Africa is such a big place. The continent of Africa is way bigger than North America. It's so huge. And the difference between, a rural town in Tanzania or Cape Town is, Cape
Yeah.
Town is like this incredible, bustling modern city with every amenity. It's incredible. So yeah, that was a really cool experience. Djibouti, I only know there's a country called Djibouti, and I know what the flag looks like because my son is obsessed with flags, and that's one of the ones, he's always trying to find new flags, and Djibouti's one of them. Tell us about Djibouti, because most people listening to this won't even have heard of it.
Well, anybody that's been in the military probably in the past 20 years is going to know it. Camp Lemonnier was a major spot for global war on terror activities. Like people will be based there and then go off and do other things. And of course, it's also borders Somalia. Djibouti is one of the like if Somalia became like unified, like all the parts, there's what they call there's 5 points of the star, and there's like there's like Somalia in terms of when people think of Moog and Kismayo, and then there's Puntland, there's Somaliland, which is where Hargeisa is, And then there's Djibouti, so that's four. And then there's the Ogaden, which is in Ethiopia. And so Djiboutians are, for all intents and purposes, primarily one of the main Somali tribes or ethnicities. And there's a little bit of Yemeni because of people coming back and forth from over the Red Sea. And then you have Eritreans as well. It's really small. There's basically one city that's also named Djibouti. There's a couple others, but they're not this like I think it's 800,000 people, at least it was when I was there, 2010 to 2012. And there's some undocumented, mostly Ethiopians who came there because the Derg, our nanny was Ethiopian, so she and her husband had fled Ethiopia when they had their socialist experiment under Mengistu. It's important because of its place on the Red Sea. The French set it up as a counterpoint to Aden when the British Empire and the French were competing with colonial expansion. So there's a very big. There used to be they've I think the Chinese have reconstituted the rail lines that then go into the port. Of course, like you need to have good rail into a seaport if you're going to have it function because most of it up until like recently was all trucks that destroys the roads, blah blah blah.
Wow. So, Ben, how did the people treat you as an American diplomat? Like, were they kind and respectful, or did they not? Did some people not like the fact that you were there in their country? Like, how were you treated in some of these countries?
I never really had any sort of like, you're from America, I don't like you, or you work at the embassy, I don't like you. A lot of it would be like going back to people wanting to get to the United States, like, could you help me get a visa? Those kind of questions. Or, I mean, there's a lot of, and this doesn't have anything to do with me being American, but there's a lot of poverty. So like people are like asking you for money
Yeah.
or things like that. But then you kind of get just used to that in terms of like how to like, no, thank you type of interactions. But because Djiboutians are Somali, there's a lot of pride in that culture. And so there's not a sort of like when I said there's a lot of pride in culture, there's a lot of pride in all cultures, but it's just like there's something special about the Somali pride. And so sometimes it would just be like they just wouldn't even pay attention to you.
Hmm.
And also they have a lot of khat there. So people are like chewing khat usually later in the day. And it's this mild narcotic that man, it seems like everybody consumed there. And then when people are like focused on their cot, they're not focused on anything but that. Or and then like maybe the guy that they're hanging out with, so they're right or left.
Gotcha. It's funny you say there's pride in all cultures, but one thing I noticed when I came to the US, in England, you'll see the St. George's Cross. That's kind of the English flag as opposed to the United Kingdom flag. You'll see that kind of a few people put that out of their window and things when there's like a big rugby game or, World Cup soccer game. But, occasionally you'll see that. But that's nothing like the town I'm in, Cedar Lake. I'll take my son and dogs to the park. On the 5 mile drive there, I'll see, 30, 40 flags, and I actually love that. I feel like
Yeah.
I love seeing that patriotism. So, in these countries that you've been to, do you feel like some are more patriotic than others?
Yeah, I probably would say it seemed like Nigerians, Mongolians, and Indonesians probably, and not in like any specific order, but all had like maybe more distinct than Tanzanians or Djiboutians based on my experience.
It's so crazy thinking about so my son's 4.5, and I've got this dream, Dan, of I've got some goals here that I really want to stay in the US for at least 3 to 5 years.
Hmm.
And who knows, things could change. But I've got this, I love the idea of doing things and giving him kind of a sense of adventure. So two things that my wife and I have been talking about. One is there's that program in Italy where you can buy a villa for €1, but you have to restore it. So I love the idea of going to, Tuscany and spending 18 months, restoring a villa there and giving him an Italian experience. And then she's from the Philippines. And I
Yeah.
love the idea of buying like a rundown resort and like restoring it and rehabbing it. And she's
Hmm.
got a lot of family members there, and we could obviously give them work and have them be a part of it. And I think that would be such a great experience for him as a young boy. And I think about your two daughters, like how like what obviously for them, at least for a few years, that was just normal. This incredible life, these American girls that are just going from country to country and getting all these experiences. But it was probably only when you came back to the East Coast, right? That where you where suddenly, as they're a bit older, and they're talking to these people that I'm sure some of them have never been anywhere other than, Mexico and the famous
Mhm.
tourist destinations. That must have been so crazy for them. Like just that lifestyle. I mean, it's just so incredible. And I bet there's some of it that they might not even have, like there's things that come back to me now, 45, 46 as a dad. There's memories that things that my dad said to me when I was, 6 or 8. And
Mhm.
I'll be with my son and it'll trigger these memories or some of these incredible experiences I had as a kid traveling with my dad around the world, going on these trips. It's going to be the same for your daughters. Like what a life they had. Just incredible.
We've been able to start traveling again. The girls, I can't believe that I'm like that their schedules are so dominant. Rhea is a wrestler, which is basically that sport never ends. There's no off season. Like the only off season like is like yesterday. And then Manya does field hockey and lacrosse, and both of those are pretty all the time as well. So we have to like pick our windows. And so we went to Portugal for Christmas this past year, and we'll go to Greece this coming year. Before that, we were like spending a lot of time in the United States, partly because we thought we were going to go back overseas again, and then through like COVID, just like it was difficult to travel. It's great to be able to take some of those trips again. You're right though, in terms of like being wanting to do it when they're young. I mean, the girls both like they had a passport when they were a month and a half old, by necessity. And then, we're traveling. Like it's like you had to take that passport photo is like something you have to learn yourself. Like you have to lay them on their back on a t-shirt because they're not gonna be able to like sit up, they can't sit up because they can't hold their head up. And it's like you try to get this picture and it's funny for like 3 or 4 years, that's their photo and
Yeah.
their the
Well,
passport. And they're just like, you know,
yeah, yeah. So I think my son was, I think he was 3 months old, and I just remember
oh, okay, yeah.
balancing him on the chair for the photo. And then the woman is like, "You got to get your hand out." So I kind of just pulled my hand out and then grabbed him before he fell, so he could get the photo. But now he's 4 and a half. He's like a little boy, and he's got this ridiculous passport photo of
Yes.
3 month baby. So and I know exactly what you mean. There's something, Ben. I realized. So for the longest time, like I said, when I was young and I didn't have any money, whatever little money I had, I used it on travel and
Mhm.
experiences. And then when I was doing really well financially, I still would enjoy traveling. Then I had a period when I retired from fighting and I was in real estate and I was really big into competing with jiu-jitsu and I got to, I won the Manila Open in Philippines and I competed, I think in every continent except Africa. I had these incredible experiences and I traveled so much. But now there's a part of me where I'm just like, I'm so happy I did it that way. And I know David Goggins talked about this, like front loading your life in certain aspects when doing things at the time to do them. But now, like my son hasn't even started, he's just starting sports. I can't imagine what it's like having your two girls' sports schedules. But it's almost like I don't want to say I've got it out of my system because I do still want to go to places and I want to go back to places I love. But I definitely am much happier having done it and just I feel much more content. Like I don't have to go, I could spend the next year in Cedar Lake, Indiana, I'll be happy. Do you feel like with all the traveling you've done, you're kind of happy, or do you feel like it's one of those things where, the more you read and the more you learn, the more you realize there's knowledge out there. And I feel like for the longest time, the more I traveled, the more I was like, the world is such a big place. Like I want to see more. I have that curiosity. Do you feel that same way that you're still curious, or after all these decades of traveling the world, you're like, oh, I'm okay to kind of be in America again and just settle down and enjoy being here.
Both. I mean, what you just said about reading and getting inspired resonates because I love to just like discover a new book, and then that book could then tell you, oh, you should go here because of like where the scene is or where the
Yes.
character goes. And you're
Yes.
like, it's something you hadn't thought about, or it could be something that doesn't exist anymore. Like you read some books about like the lead up to World War I and all these countries and empires that are gone. So it's almost like you could go and see what that like the remnants of that past is. At the same time, I really like it when we can drive places in the United States. Right now, I'm working remote for the first time ever, so there's a little bit more flexibility to like take a drive
Mm,
and do something like that, which I much prefer to flying when possible. But at the same time, I mean, as evident by the where we just went for the holidays and where we'll go next, it's wonderful to be able to take those trips when they fit.
mm,
And just like a word on the sports schedule, I don't know what it was like on the outskirts of London, but in northern Michigan, like you played your sport and maybe there was like off season, like lifting or something like that, but there wasn't this year-round aspect, and there
Yep.
wasn't some sort of like camp I could go to. Like maybe there were some guys who went down to Ann Arbor and got to go to University of Michigan quarterbacks camp or something like that for a long weekend. But the amount of focus and intensity on children's athletics right now is it's a lot different. And it could be like maybe it's this way in the Chicago area, maybe it's this way in like Northern Virginia where I live, but it was not like that when I was growing up.
Well, sports, one thing that I'm kind of sad is that we didn't have a better sports system when I grew up. So, and we don't have wrestling in England,
Hmm.
but it was really like, if you're one of my longest earliest friendships, childhood friends, Nick, he was a professional soccer player and he made a life out of it. It's awesome. And I liked soccer as a kid, but I wasn't good enough or motivated enough to
Hmm.
make it to where you can go into the programs and become a pro. So I feel like if you're really good at soccer, and then to a lesser degree, if you're good at rugby, they're the two sports in England where they do have okay programs, but it's
Yeah.
not like in the US. I just see these guys I know that used to wrestle, and that these high school kids are training and competing like professional athletes. Like they're just so
Yes.
been hardcore. And I think about you, your daughter Ray has done so well with wrestling. What's that been like? Because yeah, I'm, 15 years behind you in raising kids. And my biggest fear is I want my son, like, I want him to do whatever he wants to do. I want to expose him to a lot of different sports, but I want to have the non-negotiable that I want you to do jiu-jitsu and I want you to get your jiu-jitsu black belt one day because I know what it'll do to you as a man to have the feeling of confidence to be able to defend yourself physically. And I know the doors that it'll open up for you. I've got a good friend who always says, jiu-jitsu is the new golf. I've got so many business opportunities, business connections, friendship connections through jiu-jitsu. I want to give him that same network.
Hmm.
So what's it been like with Ray? Like, so I don't know much, that and I know for female wrestling, it's a lot less common. What was it like? Like, how did she find wrestling? And then what's it been like to be the dad of this incredibly motivated and disciplined and dedicated wrestler?
Well, this will be music to your ears. She found wrestling because of jujitsu. There was a guy who was a year ahead of her in school. She was a sophomore, she was a freshman. He's like, you should come out for wrestling. And so the rest is history there. It's a really difficult sport to watch because when your child loses, there's no doubt about it. And I'm sure there's like matches where it could be like come down to the wire and things like that, but still, it's just like to see the suffering on their face. Like I, it's wonderful to watch her win, but sometimes I hate wrestling.
Mm.
And at the same time, it's really defining who she is, and it's so incredible and humbling to see her succeed and have that willingness to focus. In terms of non-negotiables, I'm sure you're also like keeping like you think about that if you push somebody too hard to do
Yeah.
something, they'll resent you and then they'll hate that thing. My youngest daughter went away from jujitsu for a while and then came back to it. And it was like when I was trying to keep her in it, man, that was not working. And then she came back and she really liked it. And then now she's doing like the sports I mentioned. And what's cool is the main coach at our gym, he's like so supportive of them and loves to like hear what they're doing. And if they come to open mat, it's awesome. And just like, and also he'll go to Rhea's wrestling matches and follow that. And of course, like I'll talk about the other day, she was telling me about how she was doing a new move. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool ankle pick. And she's like, that's not an ankle pick. This is an ankle pick. What I'm showing you is a low single. I was like, all
Well,
right. Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, Ben, listen, I know you gotta run. We'll do part two soon because there's a million things
Okay.
I want to talk to you about. This is so awesome. I'm so proud of you, man. I'm proud of you for living the most incredible life, and there's still so much more to come. Raising two, I want to talk to you about marriage tips. You've got just celebrated 2 decades. You got married super young, but you and Katie have grown together. I know she wrote a book on parenting. I want to talk to her about that too. Just it's incredible what you're doing, man. And I'm so happy we reconnected. And I love it. You'll send me videos of Rhea's matches and just you. I know, congratulations, brother. You won a tournament recently too. It's really, really cool, Ben. Like, man, I'm so happy. It's so cool to see both of us grown up as
Yes.
dads now, but still chasing our dreams. So
I don't remember his last name, but his name was Chris. He was like the last clerk to join us.
yes. Did he used to wrestle? Or he went to
Yes, because you guys wrestled in the office once.
yeah.
And I remember
Yes, yes, yeah.
and I just remember like, wow, you are like in such good shape.
I remember, yeah, he was a wrestler. Chris Marcella. He did a double leg.
Yeah.
Caught him in a
Marcella.
guillotine.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't know what a guillotine was, and I think he had some
Yeah.
on his lip, and he was like choking on his tobacco. Brother, and we're still doing it, man. What a
Totally.
journey. Man, you're the best, brother. This has been so much fun. What a crazy life you've had.
Same.
So inspiring. I can't wait for part two. I know you got to run, but let's talk soon.